Hey everyone! I want to talk quickly about what we just saw in the previous video. That is, we learned about this container pattern that we can use. And some of you might be wondering why we even bothered. I mean, things were just fine in the shop component, and instead we just created two new files that seemingly don't do anything other than pass props down to their respective components. And that is a valid question. What we've done is shown you a pattern, a container pattern, that you can use to separate a component that renders something and a container that essentially connects the Redux part of our app and the store and passes props to a single component. Now, the key here is that refactoring is always a trade-off. When it comes to code, there are always things that you can do, that you can change, that you can improve. You can break things down, add the container pattern to simplify each component, and make sure that each file does one thing really well. But at the same time, it always adds a bit of complexity, right? You now have more files to go back and forth with. And when people usually talk about refactoring, they assume that all refactoring is good. And it is. And usually it tends to be, because what we do with refactoring is we clean up our code. We make things easier to read, easier to understand, and less complicated. However, refactoring comes in different forms. So depending on your project, depending on your team. For example, if you're working by yourself, maybe you don't need to do the container pattern. But if you're working in a large team with lots of people, maybe having the container pattern that everybody follows might be a good idea as the app gets bigger and bigger. What you have to decide for yourself is that when you refactor or you modify a file, is it worth the trade-off? Because sure, we can make things simple and keep things in just a few files with long code. We don't have to go back and forth between files, or we can break things down into simple functionalities. And you have to decide for yourself that trade-off. Should you be spending that time maybe refactoring your code, or should you be working on a new feature or fixing a bug? We have limited resources and limited time. As a developer and as a good senior developer, you have to decide for yourself when to refactor code so that technical debt doesn't accumulate, but at the same time, not end up in this endless loop where you're trying to constantly improve your code, your existing code, and breaking things down smaller and smaller, maybe into different files. Because again, refactoring is a trade-off. It's a trade-off on your time. Anytime you're refactoring, you're now working on a new feature or an existing bug. And there comes a time where refactoring has diminishing returns. So this is a skill that will just come to you naturally as you progress through your career. But keep that in mind. Not all refactoring is good. Just writing code to be clever or just cleaning up code for no reason isn't always a good thing. Always make sure there's value in what you're doing. By the way, this idea of refactoring is something we're going to explore a lot in the next section when it comes to Redux sagas. This is a warning. Redux sagas is a very complex topic. The next section, you might have to watch a couple of times to really get it. Even experienced developers find Redux sagas very frustrating to learn. But what you'll notice is that we're going to learn about refactoring in that section. And in that section, we'll be doing some refactoring that doesn't actually benefit us, but instead allows us to demonstrate how Redux Saga works. But I want you to notice how when we implement Redux sagas, we're adding more and more complexity into our app. So although sagas might be really good as apps get bigger and bigger, you'll notice that this extra layer of complexity can actually be bad for a smaller application. So keep an eye out on that. And remember, the next section is going to be a tough one. It's not mandatory for you to absolutely get that section. If you're afraid of sagas, you can even skip the next section. But for now, hopefully I didn't scare you off. I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.